Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to our third nutrition session. If you don't want to be recorded, please turn your camera off. It's just being recorded for safety purposes and to post to our website after. And I will let you take it away there, Rihanna.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. Hi, everyone. It's super nice to be back with you guys for our third session. And tonight we're going to get right into it because I'm going to talk for a little bit, just like last time.
Yeah.
And then we are going to play a game at the end of it. And if everyone is using the chat, make sure that you're talking to everyone. I'm sure that Erin will be on that. But all right, I'm going to share my screen with you and we're going to get right into it tonight. And, oh, there we go. Okie dokie. Awesome. Okay, so as you can see, we are going to be chatting about label reading and grocery shopping today. So it's going to build on a little bit of what we talked about last time. But then this is just going to give you some great practical tips as well for actually sort of seeing what's on the label and understanding what you're reading, and then some tips for grocery shopping. All right. So what we're going to cover tonight is going to be label reading, so how to read a label and what to look for, as well as grocery shopping, so how to plan before and what to do while you're grocery shopping. And then we're going to finish with a fun game, of course. Okay, so let's start with nutrition labels. You'll find these on all packaged products in Canada. Generally, it's going to be on like the back side or the side of the container or the box. And these are not required though for like fresh vegetables or like raw meat. So you might not find them on there. And the nutrition label in Canada was updated back in 2016. And I believe that manufacturers are required to have switched over to the new label by this year. But with like COVID, they might be delaying it a little bit. So you'll likely still see some old packaging or like old nutrition labels, but hopefully more and more new ones. So we're going to be chatting about the new ones mostly. As you can see in this picture, there are some changes to the nutrition facts table, which is what we're looking at on the top picture. That's the facts table. And you're going to see that the serving sizes stand out a little bit more. The protein section has been moved up to be with the other macronutrients like fat and carbs, which we chatted about last week, or a couple weeks ago, if you remember that. And at the bottom in the micronutrient section, some changes have been made with what's required to be on there. So generally before, like Canadians get a lot of vitamin C. Like generally we get adequate vitamin C. So having it on the label just wasn't as helpful as it once was. So now there are some nutrients of concern that have been identified as, just as important for the general public health. And so you're gonna always find potassium and calcium and iron on the labels. And companies can choose to include other nutrients as well if they want to, such as like you might see like vitamin D, or sometimes vitamin C will still be on there. And some labels will have more than others. And the other part of the nutrition label is the ingredient section, which is usually around the nutrition facts table, but sometimes it's in a different spot. And on some older packages, for sure, it might be in a different spot. And the ingredients are going to be listed by how much is in that product. And this is also where you're going to find the allergen section. So they have to list any common allergens that are going to be in the contains or may contain section if it's a possibility that that allergen is in there, or if the food like clearly contains that allergen, such as like on a peanuts label, they're clearly going to say this food contains peanuts. All right, so then when we're looking at the nutrition label, so the nutrition facts table, there are a few important things I would just invite you to look at, keeping in mind that these are just references. They are not specific to you as an individual.
Please check your.
Okay, if everyone wants to keep muted, that would be great. And so the first one that we're going to definitely want to look at is the serving size. This is important as all of the other nutrients listed below are what's in a serving size, not the whole container, unless the serving size is for the whole container. You don't have to only like eat what the serving size lists, but it can just be good just to use as a reference to see what you're getting nutrient wise out of the food. And then I always like to jump down to fiber right away. So, fiber is so important for gut health and helping keep you full longer during the day. And this will only, though, be applicable in foods that contain carbohydrates. So, it might be like foods like, crackers or bread or wraps or granola bars or like frozen fruit or stuff like that. And then the third thing that we might want to watch for is protein. So another favorite of mine, protein will also help keep you satisfied longer. And of course, it helps with muscle repair and building. So it can be important when you're like planning a snack or you're planning your meals. And protein's, of course, found in a wide variety of foods. And another one is sodium, which is another word for salt, basically. And this is more applicable if you or someone in your household has maybe like high blood pressure or a heart condition, or just someone who's sensitive to salt. But even just for general health, if we are able to choose lower sodium products, that's always a bonus, as prepackaged products are where we as Canadians get the most salt in our diets from. And another one that you could possibly look at would be maybe the micronutrients at the very bottom section. So most of the time, honestly, though, I don't pay much attention to them unless I'm looking for a specific nutrient, such as maybe like vitamin D, as this can be hard to get from our diet. And during the winter, especially, then we don't get it from the sun. So sometimes I look at that. But for, people who maybe have other health conditions, of course, there's going to be nutrients that they might look for on there, but generally, just for everyday eating, we might not have to pay too much attention to the micronutrient section. And then, of course, we have our fats and our carbs, and that includes like sugars under the umbrella of carbohydrates. And again, honestly, I don't recommend getting too wrapped up in these numbers. That's different, of course, if you have a condition where you have to sort of watch out for that, like diabetes, we would be paying attention to the carbohydrates. But in general, you can look at these numbers as a reference, but I wouldn't be too worried about them. It basically just says what that food is made up of. It's macronutrients. And lastly, of course, the allergen section in the ingredient list can be important if you or someone that you live with or that you know has an allergy. It's always good to be aware of what could be a potential concern for them. And with each of these sections, other than the allergens, you'll see a percentage beside them, um, except for protein as well, apparently. But, and Health Canada has defined 5% or less as contains a little of that nutrient, and 15% or more as contains a lot of that nutrient. So this can be helpful just to like quickly see if the food product has a lot or a little of a certain nutrient. So for example, with like sodium, that might be helpful, or like fiber or something. But again, it's more of a reference guide and it's not 100% individualized to you.
Sorry, Rihanna, we do have a question. Suzanne, you have a question. Can you ask it or can it wait till the end?
Because I have a friend, and she's have allergies of cats and lactose tolerant with dairy.
Okay.
That's my question.
Yeah, so lactose and like dairy products. So dairy is a common allergen. So if a food did contain dairy or milk ingredients, they would have to list that. However, lactose, they don't necessarily have to list because generally lactose is an intolerance and not an allergy, but the dairy products would be, and generally lactose is just found in the dairy products. So if you see a dairy label or a dairy allergen, that might kind of tip you off that that's something that you might not want to have, especially if you're allergic to it and have a diagnosed allergy.
And I know I just going to my doctor and she told me I am allergic to cats. What I should do.
Okay, yeah, so we're not maybe going to discuss our personal allergies on here. It's not really appropriate for the group setting, but if you want to talk about that with Erin afterwards, if that's a concern for you, that would be a great place to go.
Okay.
But yeah, dealing with allergies can be really difficult, and hopefully these are just for food allergies specifically. Hopefully that these labels make it a bit more clear and a bit easier for people with allergies to identify what foods are safe and maybe not so safe for them to eat. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. So then one last thing about nutrition labels is nutrition claims. So these are usually going to be on like the front label and highlighted to look kind of nice. But these claims or statements are basically just describing the amount of a nutrient in a product. These claims are regulated, so a product can't just like have these claims if it's not actually true. And they can be useful, but should also be taken with like a grain of salt, no pun intended. But looking at the examples on the screen, you'll see that the cereal in sort of the farthest side says very high in fiber at the very top corner of the box. Very high for fiber means 6 grams or more per serving. And again, noting that serving size is important. And then with the sodium, with like this chicken broth, you might see like a reduced label or a no salt added claim. And the reduced has to be at least 25% reduced, which says that's what this claim says is 25% less salt. But that could still mean that the product has quite a bit of salt in it, even if it's reduced by 25%, depending on how much it had in the first place. But then if a product says low sodium, that means they have to have less, like equal to or less than.
You're a good mechanic. Whatever you do, it works. It works now.
So 140 milligrams or less means low sodium. And then if it's a no salt added, that generally means that it will have minimal sodium in the product, usually only what's naturally found in it. But like I said, sometimes these can be used, sort of just to influence the customer to buy these products, especially with health claims, which are different than nutrient claims, but are still regulated. But an example of a health claim would be oat fiber helps lower cholesterol. So a brand like Honey Nut Cheerios might say that, but in reality, the cereal doesn't have nearly as much oat fiber as, say, oatmeal. So yes, these claims can be helpful, but we should also always still use a critical eye when it comes to packaged foods and marketing tactics. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you guys a quick question. So just like show of hands, you don't have to unmute, but show of hands, who here is involved in the grocery planning, the grocery shopping, making the grocery list? Does anyone here help their family with it or do it themselves? Okay, I see a couple hands, some maybe hands. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask before we get into this next section, because this could be good for you guys to know totally. And then if you want to share it with your family members afterwards as well, that could always be a good plan too. Okay, so I'm going to quickly share my screen again and we'll get back into the grocery shopping section. All right, so now we're into grocery shopping. So understanding a nutrition label can be really helpful for when you're grocery shopping, especially when comparing, between similar products like cereals or granola bars or yogurts, for example. But having a plan before you go to the grocery store will make your trip so much more enjoyable. So first, you're going to want to take inventory of what you already have in your house. This is important so that we reduce food waste and don't buy things that we don't really need. So you know you're going to want to check your pantry, your fridge, and your freezer just to see what you already have that you can use or that you might want to use in your upcoming meals. And depending how full your pantry or freezer is, you might want to look through there before each grocery shop, or even just, like once a month or once every second month. Find a system that works for you. And secondly, you're going to want to plan for what you're going to need to buy. So some people get really into like budgeting and meal planning and planning their grocery list accordingly, but like myself, some people do it a little bit more casually. But either way, think about what meals and snacks you might like to have in the upcoming week or 2 weeks or however often you grocery shop. And then take inventory of what you already have and then build your grocery list to fill in the rest of what you need. So consider what new things you'll need and what staples you might need to refill. So you might know that you like need bread and milk every week, no matter what. But then some weeks you might buy different, sort of fresh or special ingredients to make sort of like a fun or a special meal, like broccoli and chicken for a stir fry, or ground beef and tomatoes and wraps for tacos or something like that. So those might be things that you add the week of, but you might always know that you need milk and bread no matter what. So then the last way to prepare for your grocery shop is to then stick to the list. So that seems simple, but this can again reduce food waste and help you stick to your budget if that's applicable. And of course, you might see something that you like forgot to put on your list or that you remember that you really needed. But if you come across an item that just sort of like looks good or sounds good, ask yourself if you really need it that week or if it could wait till the next time you grocery shop. If it's not an immediate need or you don't see a use for it immediately, it can probably wait. All right, so then here's a couple good examples of grocery lists. So if you enjoy writing them out, that's great. If you organize it like this on your phone, that's also fine. But having a list is important so you stay organized and don't miss anything that you need. And it'll just help you stay on track while you're in the grocery store. I personally just like make a list on my phone so I don't have to carry paper around with me, but it's totally up to you. These ones are nice as they split up as they kind of just like split up your list a little bit. So that usually helps with just like creating the list at home. It makes it easier to put things down and sort of decide what you need. And then it also helps you just find the products while you're at the store. And if you go to the same grocery store often, you could even organize your list into sort of like the aisles or the sections in the store that you walk around in. So, like if you walk into your store and the fresh produce is always the first section, you might put those at the top of your list. And if the milk and the eggs are in the way in the back and you always pick those up last, you might put those at the bottom of your list so you can kind of do it in an organized fashion. All right. And so then while you're grocery shopping, there is a few things that you can do to just help you sort of stay on track and stick to your list and make the most out of your trip. So first, you're just going to want to take your time like that. I highly recommend finding a time that you can do it when you're not going to be super rushed or you're not going to be starving and like need to get home to have supper. So you're rushing through your grocery shop. Um, you might just want to pick a time that's a bit more relaxed for you and that makes sense for you. And then this might just allow you to be able to explore the store and maybe check out some nutrition labels. And second, we just want to be aware of marketing. Just because something is on sale doesn't always mean it's a good price or that you have to buy it. Also, the food and the little things that they like have on the shelves at the checkout lines are there simply to like lure you in and make an impulse buy. This is a classic marketing tactic and often pressures customers into buying a few extra things they didn't really have on their list. And I mean, sometimes it will be on your list, but more often than not, it's probably not going to be on your list. So it's fine to grab those things at the checkout once in a while, but just be aware that those things are put there for that exact reason. And lastly, have a plan. So besides like prepping your grocery list before you go to the store, I'd also recommend getting to know your grocery store a little better. So know which aisles have what, plan out how to walk around the store, and no, you don't just have to stick to the outside aisles. The inside aisles also have a lot of great foods, but it doesn't hurt to get to know the layout of the store and just sort of know how you're going to tackle your grocery shop. Okay, that wraps up this section of our chat. I'm just gonna stop sharing for a quick second. Okay. I'm just looking through the chat real quick. We're gonna have time for questions afterwards, just like last time. But now we're gonna play a quick game. And so I'm just gonna get organized here and
Yes, Jim.
and make sure that Aaron and Cameron and I are on the same page. All right, so Aaron, I'm just gonna send you